There's less than a week until the 2025 British and Irish Lions squad is named, and we are now continuing our countdown, comprehensively looking at every contender by diving deep into one of the positions that produces the most great Lions. It's the second row. We sat down to go over every contender. Second row is one of the most interesting positions because I think there are two real contenders that are nailed into the team, and then beyond that, it's become very, very open all of a sudden. We can start with Maro Itoje, who is the standout contender, one of the two real front runners for the captaincy, has been on multiple Lions tours, has played every test, 2 tours in a row, and looking to continue that kind of Alan Wynne-Jones legacy and record of being a repeat test Lion.
He's really in the driver's seat to do that, isn't he? That pretty much since he's been playing senior rugby, he has been the Lions' starting lock, which is huge. Not many players can say that they've been doing that for that long. And yeah, like this Six Nations, he's remained relentless and annoying in every single facet. As an opposition player, watching Maro Itoje is utterly hateful and annoying and frustrating. I love the one moment every 4 years where he gets to be one of your own.
Yes, absolutely. He is one of the most brilliant players on this planet. And you can look at his stats and they are high. However, that doesn't show you the impact he's making. Because so often he will do something that isn't technically counted as an effect on a defensive ruck. But what it'll do is just irritate the opposition scrum half. So much of what he does is just being incredibly annoying on top of being technically excellent. He's one of the best line-out forwards in Britain and Ireland. He is one of the most athletic second rows available. He is one of the most complete players on this planet. He scores a deceptive number of tries. He carries much better than you'd think. He can offload. He has everything in his game.
Yeah, the maul is probably the big aspect as well of his game. That both sides of the ball, defensively, he's getting those long levers over the top and ruining opposition's chances, and mainly in attack because he's so big and heavy. He makes such a big difference when he's constantly rocking the maul forwards.
For me, he would partner Eben Etzebeth in a Wood 15.
I find it hard to argue with that. However, there is a man that I do think would definitely have something to say about that. And that man is Tadhg Beirne.
Yes.
Another man who's available to the Lions. That is such a good combination of players right there. Tadhg Beirne plays across the back five equally well. He plays like a player who's playing every position at once, really. He has that game intelligence. Ireland usually play in a 1-3-2-2 these days, and he can splinter between any of those positions equally well, which is quite rare for a player of his size. Like, he's really, really tall, really athletic. His handling is outstanding. His carrying game is phenomenal. He's got a huge left peg on him as well, which is something that I remember was teased last Lions tour. There was footage of Itoje and Beirne both doing kicking practice in the week as a means of trying to throw the Springboks off. So you never know when something like this might come out. But yeah, incredible skill set on the big man.
Yeah, just absolute phenomenon. Ever since he kind of first broke through at the Scarlets, and he's just continued getting better and better and better. And the form he's been in for months to the last, frankly, 5 years, never mind the last year. Time after time he pops up, he's constantly man of the match in every game Munster seem to play, seemingly. You know, him or Gavin Coombs, who is vaguely in the conversation, I guess. And
one of Ireland's best players, easily.
Gavin Coombs, absolutely agreed. Yeah, he's just been brilliant. Also, these two locks are unique in all the players we're going to talk about in that they are complete jackal threats. They give you that turnover threat, right? And it's Ireland use him a lot, Beirne, in that jackal threat position. We also see him often going for intercepts. He's used in that kind of Eben Etzebeth role of shooting out a line, and I think that's interesting. You can see Itoje and the way he defends for England, which is being incredibly athletic and flying out a line, again, in that Etzebeth role. We can potentially see if they're going to run a similar defensive system, which it looks like they're going to do. These two will partner each other extremely well. However, there has got to be a question. Most people are penciling them in as the two Lions starting second rows. Will Farrell look at those as competition for each other? Will he look at those two as being such similar players that instead of, well, they're the two best second rows, does he want someone else beside them? And if that is the case, I think we move on to the next few guys, and lead amongst them, I'd say, Joe McCarthy.
Yes. Big Joe McCarthy, he is a proper specimen. Such a carrying threat. Leinster often use him in quite a unique role where they will have one forward run in off 9, then he will run like a semi-boot kind of line, where it's still in a carrying role, but with a bit of deception around him, and it really, really works. Him and Dan Sheehan and Caelan Doris all used in that role really, really effectively, and it's something I could see the Lions utilising, giving Joe McCarthy these big 1v1 carries. But Joe McCarthy is somebody who I think is not far off penciled in for the Lions.
The raw mass of the guy, isn't it? Like the raw size, he's phenomenal. Ever since coming and making his debut against France last year, I think there is still a question mark around his discipline.
Definitely.
I think that is the one area of his game he needs to iron out a little bit. That still remains an issue. It's not the quantity of penalties he gives away, it's the penalties he gives away that are the problem. They're so often really stupid and preventable.
It's the choice of them.
And he's due for, in the way that, people criticise Itoje for this as well. Itoje gives away more penalties, but they tend to be smart penalties. Where McCarthy's penalty count isn't as high, but they tend to be really dumb. And that is the only thing I think counting against him. Otherwise, I'd have him pretty nailed in, especially with George Martin now ruled out for injury. With that arm injury that will see him not recover in time for the tour.
It's the one thing that does make me slightly scratch my head is that there potentially is a bit of friction if Joe McCarthy and Maro Itoje is your second row combination. Because that is a lot of penalties to give away. As you say, Maro Itoje's penalties that he chooses to give away generally are in smart positions where he's on the back foot or he knows what the referee is less likely to give, and so he chances his arm at something. Whereas Joe McCarthy, there was the one in the Six Nations where we got the yellow card, for instance, for blocking, for pulling back, which is really stupid.
One against Wales where Wales were trying to exit like right on their own try line, and he flies and he gives away the dumbest penalty you'll ever see.
There's stuff like that, but ultimately, we are talking about this really kind of theoretically. But giving away a penalty is giving away a penalty. And it is very rarely a smart decision. That usually you would much rather do something else than that because you're bringing the referee into the game, you're disadvantaging your team. And having 2 second rows whose discipline isn't great potentially is a bit of a drawback.
But the angles McCarthy can hit, especially if you're looking at some back row options in a likely back row probably contains 3 line-out jumpers. If you count the likes of Tom Curry and Jack Morgan can both jump at line-outs. So having someone as a second out-and-out jumper isn't such an issue. So McCarthy being a decent jumper, similar to George Martin, who I think would have been in if he had been fit, but unfortunately not. I think he is, a very, very strong contender.
As an athlete, you have to.
The angles he hits, the way he runs lines, the way he can operate within that Farrell system where you want everyone to be an option at all times. His speed back up to the floor, up from the floor rather, is incredibly high. I think he is, very safely close to this team, if not absolutely.
I love watching that guy play. He's an incredible rugby player. So,
this is where we start to move into the Wild West a little bit. No, I think there's one more guy actually, Ollie Chessum.
Yes.
Who has been brilliant. And again, George Martin getting ruled out, not to keep coming back to it, but has opened a door for this guy again, I think. He is one of the great technicians of the game, whilst also being incredibly athletic. Plays 6 as well, so there's an option there. The thing that always comes to mind when I think of Ollie Chessum, right, was before he had England caps, when he was first breaking through at Leicester Tigers, I went to see Leicester play against the Ospreys. And I was, taken out to do a bunch of stuff on the sidelines. And I was there an hour before the game. And the only player who was out on the pitch was Ollie Chessum, who was walking up and down both touchlines and just checking the spring underfoot, checking what spots on the pitch were most elastic to him getting up, like practicing his jump, getting up there on his own. And it told me everything about him. In an instant, like, oh, this is who this guy is. This is what he's like. Like, he is so dedicated, works so hard, and understands that set piece and that role unbelievably well.
The small margins of pro rugby, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Knowing those inside out. And yet, the line out is what Ollie Chessum promises above everything else. Once again, a humongous human being who has those very long, gangly arms with which he can pluck balls out the air, and very good on stealing opposition lineouts as well, Ollie Chessum. And once again, we've talked about this a lot with the forwards, but attacking breakdowns is, if you're over the ball and he flops on you, there is no chance you're surviving that clear out. And that is what he brings to this to the game. As you said earlier, like George Martin probably would have been a whisker above him in contention before the injury, but I definitely think that now Ollie Chessum, he's in a good position to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. So from here, you start to move into the more wildcard picks, right? You have one slot, and I think Chessum could be the guy who ends up taking this. You're probably looking at someone that's going to play both 6 and back row. We're probably looking at 12 players between the back row and the second row. And do you have someone that straddles that divide that allows you to take an extra back rower, perhaps?
There's one obvious name here. Well, I say obvious. There's one name who I think a lot of people consider the standout candidate who is equally good as a lock and as a 6. And he is a world-class rugby player.
Well, he has been a world-class rugby player.
He has been a world-class rugby player. Courtney Laws.
Yes. One of the great players of the last decade. A phenomenal athlete.
A Lion himself.
Yep. Multiple tours. Is now playing in the Pro Day Duh. And by all accounts, is playing very well in the Pro Day Duh. But is still playing in the Pro Day Duh.
What do you mean, playing as a second row in the Pro Day Duh? That's the highest level
This comes
when you're a massive lad.
Two sides, right? One is he's not playing at the top intensity of rugby, so do you have to level his performance out a bit, right? And go, oh, would he playing at the same level if he was upper gear? It's questionable, we can't know. The other level is he's playing in, not just the second division, the Pro Day Duh.
The most challenging league that exists.
The league in which a second row's job is to punch as many people as possible. The league in which scoring a try is equivalent to biting someone in terms of marks on a second row's performance.
Yeah.
Like, this is a completely different style of rugby. However, you've got to go and judge him, haven't you? You've probably got to send someone out and get hold of those tapes of Breve playing to have a look at him. Because if he's playing well enough, he has the skill set, the ability, the nous, and it comes back to that question of who do you want in the changing room with you? You want people who've been on Lions tours. You want someone who you grew up watching on TV.
Yeah. He, in a way, is the perfect Lion.
Yeah.
Because he's been on several tours, as you say. He was in the form of his life, playing the best rugby we've ever seen him play over a long career about 12 months ago. And suddenly, as you say, we've not had the chance to see him play as much rugby. But he has to be really seriously considered. I wanted to say he's your very good midweek captain for people coming up, but that's patronising towards Courtney Laws. Because if you look at the rugby he was playing for Northampton at the end of last season, you look at that and you go no, he's the first name on the team sheet.
Yeah.
At that point, he was. And he's made it very clear that he wants to go on this Lions tour, that if he gets the call, he will 100% say yes. He's a very proud Lion, even though he's retired from internationals with England, that he wants to do this again because he's done such a great job before, has got in the test team multiple times in past. He's a prime Lion. Yeah. He has to be considered.
They send emails out to 70, 80 odd players before the tour to basically give them the contract to sign that you'll be available when the tour comes around. I think if he's in that list, if they're considering him, he probably sneaks in. But I think there's a chance that...
That's so exciting as a thought,
But there's a chance that they're just not thinking about it. They're
Yeah.
just going, well, the Pro Day Duh season also critically ends late. Is he going to get released in time? There's all of these issues there. They've got agreements with the 4 home unions. They don't have agreements with LNR in France, which is going to be an issue with a few other players that will come up. Who are playing in France. Dave Ribbons is worth a mention as well. He's playing at Toulon and playing incredibly well. Has been captaining them lately.
Excellent.
Has been playing some of the best rugby of his career. And yet you go, well, potentially Toulon are going well. If they make the top 14 final, he won't be available to the third game of the tour at the earliest.
Yeah.
So that probably does take him out of contention.
Yeah.
Because he isn't the level of outstanding where you go, well, is he looking at a definite test spot or fighting for that spot? Probably not. So you probably knock him out of contention.
It's hard to tell, isn't it?
And it
It's hard to
becomes
tell.
that France-based question that Farrell said he's going to contact clubs individually and see if they can get out there. The Breve coaches have said that they want him to go as an example to their young players. So is he going to be released early? Are they going to do everything to make sure he goes? Who knows?
The Pro Day Duh never ends is the thing as well.
Yeah.
It's a constantly moving league that has 1,000 rounds in it.
If they end up in the access match, that takes place well into the Lions tour.
The coaches might change their tune about Courtney Laws going at that point. I wonder how often there's been a Lion playing in the second division of club rugby. That's quite an interesting thought, isn't it? But yeah, Courtney Laws, a prime candidate. We'll have to come back to him later on, for sure.
Yes.
As far as set-piece locks go, so we've named some athletes who will carry a lot of ball around the park. Somebody who, again, is a good carrier, but I think is primarily known as a proper line-out forward, one of the best callers of line-outs in Europe, Scott Cummings.
Yeah.
An outstanding player for Scotland. What do we reckon?
Yeah. I think there is a battle going on here between Scott Cummings and Adam Beard, who's just come back from injury but missed the Six Nations, to be, if you are taking someone, and past Lions tours have all had this guy, and I don't know if Andy Farrell likes this guy. When you look at his island squads, they don't tend to have this guy in them. An out-and-out line-out caller. a guy who was in there purely to sort the line-out out. In the absence of a specialist line-out coach, they'll often take whoever the best line-out forward is, and it doesn't matter if the rest of the game isn't there. You're talking about George Cruz, you're talking about Jeff Parling. You go back over any Lions tour, and someone will have snuck in.
Donegal
Callaghan, Adam Beard himself.
Yeah.
Onto these tours for being a line-out forward, right? And Beard and Cummings are two of the best in the UK, available at the minute, UK and Ireland. Ian Henderson, I think, is also worth mentioning in this spot as well. Played a bunch in the Six Nations, getting on a bit now, but has been on 2 Lions tours himself. So,
by all means, a great Lion as well.
Yeah.
That a lot of people who've been on those tours with Ian Henderson, they have name-checked him as a really great leader
someone that
in the
gets on
squad.
with everyone. I think there's potentially 3 players there who are battling for one spot.
I think out of those 3, Cummings has the most money in the bank, having
played
played
the
in
Six
Six
Nations.
Nations and played very well.
But then you have the edge of Henderson is Irish, knows the system, and has been on tours before. Adam Beard went on the tour before. Yeah. So there is pros and cons to every player. My question is, I don't think Andy Farrell will take one.
Really?
I think if Warren Gatland was in charge, those 3 would be battling for one spot, and they'd go. I think Andy Farrell likes the second rows to be more dynamic and work around the park, and he'd take a hit on his line-out percentage if it meant getting someone off the floor quicker, if it meant someone carrying more, if it meant an extra option in his attack.
You want work around the park? I've got a guy for you. Dafydd Jenkins.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on Dafydd Jenkins? High tackle count, really high breakdowns hit, particularly in attack. Decent on the jackal as well. Good line-out forward.
Yeah.
What do we reckon?
So, Dafydd Jenkins played 40 minutes fewer than Tadhg, Beirne, and I think 50-odd fewer than Maro Itoje in the Six Nations. Yet, he made the most total involvements of any second row in the Six Nations this year, in terms of combined rucks hit, tackles made, and carries. He is an absolute workhorse. He is the hardest working second row in Britain and Ireland. Yeah. And I don't think that's up for argument. His success rate on those is incredibly high, 95% tackle success, I think 85% ruck clean out effectiveness, which is very high when you're hitting 150 plus rucks in the Six Nations. He is unbelievable in terms of sheer work rate. He gets through more work than anyone else.
Yeah.
I think he has a disproportionately good chance. I think he is right up there. And I think George Martin's injury has propelled him up the furthest.
Yes, 100% agree. It's very hard to take any Welsh player seriously as a contender to actually go on the plane.
Sure.
But I think this Welsh team are a lot better for having Dafydd Jenkins in it.
Absolutely. Every single raw numbers stat other than carries made, Dafydd Jenkins is in the top 5 in the Six Nations this year, right? And if you go down to of just second rows, he's in the top 3 or he's the top 1, in many cases. He made the most tackles of any second row. He was second in terms of ruck entries of any second row. He is right up there in basically everything. And you can't overlook that when Andy Farrell prioritises work rate above anything else. He doesn't have that much carrying and dynamism to his game, but he's a solid passer of the ball. He can work in those systems, and he does carry as well, right? He still made 30 carries in the Six Nations. Yeah. He's very, very high. I did, inspired by this, go through just British and Irish Lions eligible second rows and look at who made the most ruck entries, who made the most tackles, and who made the most carries in this year's Six Nations. And the really interesting thing is the same names crop up time and time again, right? Between these 3 top 5s, there are only 7 players.
Wow.
So, Maro Itoje, as we mentioned, Dafydd Jenkins, as we mentioned, is there time and time again. Tadhg, Beirne, again. These 3 basically make up the top 3 in every stat.
Wow, Jenkins hitting with the big dogs.
Yeah. However, top for carries is Will Rowlands, who also crops up for breakdown entries. His effectiveness at those breakdowns is lower, but he's hitting a lot.
He's a very good athlete, Will Rowlands.
Puts himself about. Do we think Will Rowlands is in the conversation?
Not above these guys that we've talked about.
Agreed. I think if there's a nuclear bomb dropped on second row land and all of them get radiation poisoning, providing they didn't go to rugby school, then perhaps Will Rowlands gets called up. But I think he's lower down in the conversation. Johnny Gray crops up for carries and tackles made, which is his classic thing. He makes a lot of tackles. His work rate is incredibly high.
Yeah. High tackle percentage of actually not missing them as well.
But the guy that surprised me, that crops up in all 3 lists, he is second of carries for second row, 1 behind Rowlands. He's 5th for tackle count, and he's 2nd for cleanouts. It's Grant Gilchrist.
Really?
Grant Gilchrist's stats are so much higher than I thought they were.
Wow.
Quietly doing a lot of work.
And between him and Cummings, you've got your line-out calling sorted, that either one of those could do a good job. And again, they're competing for a similar spot to each other. But once again, That's kind of put the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit,
Yeah.
hasn't it? Grant Gilchrist is an option.
I feel like the problem is Dafydd Jenkins' stats are very similar but slightly higher.
Sure.
So if you're taking someone in the scrum cap to fill probably that like last lock spot, Jenkins is probably one place above him.
Probably knocks him out, doesn't he?
Grant Gilchrist has really like made a name for himself.
There's
in
a
Six
dark
Nations.
horse right
like,
there.
Proper dark horse, someone that could end up called up yet. I don't think we'll see him in the initial squad, but I think he may end up being called up.
Yeah.
You know,
And would do a good job.
Yeah.
There's one more name that I want to talk about then.
Okay.
So, a guy who is extremely good around the park, very different player from all the players we've mentioned here. Absolutely rapid, incredible athlete.
Yeah.
Ryan Baird.
yeah, someone that covers that 6th and 2nd row spot as well.
Yeah, plays across the back 5 once again. I think there have been criticisms that he's just a show pony, but also, like, have you seen him at the line-out? He's brilliant. Also, just generally, Leinster's line-out stats are very, very strong. They have one of the best line-outs in Europe. They are in the top 3 for most line-outs stolen in Europe. I feel like he would suit this system to the ground, and he's taken
and
it
he
to
has.
international rugby really well.
Yeah.
So I don't see a downside to Ryan Baird, even if he is a show
A
pony.
lot of energy. As you say, you're probably relying on someone else to hit the sheer number of rucks. But if you are looking at Beirne and Itoje as your test starters, is he then becoming the bench spot?
The point of
Are
difference.
you looking at him as the guy to come in and fill that spot as the number 19 or number 20?
Yeah, if you go 6'2", he's the perfect guy to have, isn't he?
He can come on and make an impact. And is that more valuable than having someone who is going to play 80 minutes and to hit ruck after ruck after ruck, someone who can come on and turn a game if you are, say, you know, narrowly behind against the force, or you need someone to spark something in a test?
Yeah.
I think Andy Farrell clearly rates him incredibly highly. Him playing 6 gives you an interesting option. I think he is a very good contender to be that hybrid player between the two.
Yeah.
I would rate his chances very, very highly.
Great in broken field, really good on that charge down as well,
Yeah.
which is a huge job for these. Beirne and Itoje, we already know they have that as a specialism in their game. Australia, who kick a lot off 9. You're looking at Nick White, you're looking at Jake Gordon, really got strong kickers, send it miles.
Yeah.
And if you can block them from getting that away in the first place, that is huge for the Lions. And Ryan Baird is definitely a guy who brings that.
There's a couple of other guys I think probably worth a fleeting mention. Chris Shunza, who might be a case of Farrell looking at him going like, I like those raw materials. I like the size of the guy. I like what he can do. I like that he can play anywhere in the back row. He can play number 8, he can play 7, or he can play 2nd row. I don't think his chances are strong.
No, me neither.
But I think he's worth mentioning and passing.
Yeah.
And then we have the elephant in the room, James Ryan,
Yes.
who had a poor Six Nations
Yeah.
and has been having a slightly sloppy season. His stats are, if you go through all the second row we've brought up in this video, the lowest in terms of average number of impacts in the game. He has not been the player he was even 2 years ago.
It's a frustrating
become
one
this
because he's
weird
not as
thing.
good a player as he is, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Because he's such a good athlete. We've seen him do some unbelievable things. But I now think he's in that Roland's camp of just good player, but nowhere near these guys.
It's weird though, because he has 2 Lions tours in a row, been one of the best second rows in the world, been top 5 certainly, and then his form's dropped off a cliff in Lions year. And it's interesting, his discipline has also tanked. He's suddenly added these stupid penalties we saw in the autumn in particular, and yet he knows the system inside out, and Farrell trusts him, Farrell's continued to pick him, and I think he's probably going to end up going.
You do?
I do. My gut says Farrell's going to take him, and I wouldn't have him anywhere near if it was my selection, but it's not my selection, it's Andy Farrell's selection, and he's going to pick players he knows. And he plays for Leinster, he knows that system, he's played in that system for how many ever years, since he was about 14, and knows those line-out calls. They're probably going to use a similar calling system, at least, if not the same calls. So he knows he can trust him to do that. I think there's a very good chance that James Ryan goes.
So,
Let's very quickly run through who we think's going. Itoje is going, Beirne is going, right? We're happy on those,
yeah.
right?
I think we can lock in Chessum,
I'd take Chessum, I'd take McCarthy.
McCarthy.
I think they're in.
I think all 4 of those, they're great selections.
I think you're then looking at one other specialist second row, and potentially there's one other you can take from the back row.
Who could eat up a back row
to
slot.
go back and forth between the two. And I think if you take one, that is Courtney Laws. I think Courtney Laws can be that slot. It's Laws or Baird are kind of fighting for one spot.
So we've got Laws, Baird and James Ryan, I think, are the front runners here. Or Cummings. Oh no, Dafydd Jenkins. Dafydd Jenkins.
Do you take Dafydd Jenkins as that 5th lock? As the 5th specialist lock, and then you have an extra spot as the back row hybrid? Or do you just take a back row hybrid?
I was hell-bent on Courtney Laws 10 minutes ago. But because you've said those stats that Jenkins achieves are the same as Itoje and Beirne, I'm so tempted by him. It makes you wonder what he could achieve in a really good attack and defence.
Okay. I think George Martin would be in if he was fit, but do we take Jenkins and then have Laws floating around as the back row option? Or do we take Ryan Baird?
I think we need to park the Laws/Baird thing for now.
Okay,
until we've picked the back row.
Okay.
And thereafter, once we come to our last video on this, we select.
It's Jenkins or Ryan. Which do you benefit? Which do you want? Do you want someone that knows the system and knows you can do it, or someone that stats are incredibly high?
I'm taking Jenkins.
Yeah.
His stats are high. And yeah, I feel like he's a temptation. I think you want to scratch the itch. What can Jenkins achieve in this team?
I would take Jenkins, but I think Farrell might take Ryan.
Reckon.
That's what my gut says.
Ah, we're picking Ryan's team.
I'm happy to go on your head and take Jenkins because I think he's the better
on my
player
head, be it.
I think he's a player playing better this year.
Yeah.
But
I reckon Ryan will get caught up in the tour at some point.
My gut says James Ryan's
on my head, be it Jenkins.
All right. That's it, done.
And we will be back before too long on Sunday as we look into the centres before moving on to the back row and the back three over the next couple of days. We're in Lions Week. We're into Lions Week. It's all happening. There'll be loads more going up on the channel, and we'll see you all for more of that very soon alongside more rugby.